The Horror Next Door, a true tale of neighborly terror. In the quiet suburbs of Kansas City, the quaint charm of Maplewood Drive was disrupted by a series of chilling events that have since become a cautionary tale for anyone who has ever lived next to a seemingly normal neighbor. This is the true story of James and Sarah Thompson, a young couple whose lives were turned upside down by the man who lived next door. The beginning. James and Sarah moved to Maplewood Drive in the spring of 2010, excited to start their new life together in what they believed to be a safe and friendly neighborhood. The street was lined with well-kept lawns, children playing, and neighbors who waved as they passed by. It seemed like the perfect place to settle down. Their new home was adjacent to that of Harold Whitman, a middle-aged man who had lived there for over a decade. At first, Harold appeared to be a reserved but polite neighbor. He rarely engaged in conversation, but always greeted the Thompsons with a nod or a wave. James and Sarah thought nothing of it, attributing his reticence to shyness. The first signs. It wasn't long before strange incidents began to occur. It started with minor nuisances. Their mail would go missing or be found opened, and they would hear odd noises at night. James assumed it was just neighborhood kids playing pranks, while Sarah, although unsettled, tried to dismiss her growing unease. One evening, Sarah noticed Harold standing by his window, staring directly into their house. She mentioned it to James, who shrugged it off, suggesting Harold was just curious about his new neighbors. However, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She began to close the curtains earlier each evening, hoping to regain some sense of privacy. Escalation. As the months passed, the disturbances grew more pronounced. James and Sarah's cat, Muffin, went missing for 2 days and returned home injured. The veterinarian suggested the wounds were not caused by an animal, but by a human. The couple was horrified, but had no evidence to point to anyone in particular. Then their garden started to suffer. Sarah took great pride in her flower beds, but someone seemed intent on destroying them. Plants were uprooted, flowers trampled, and one night they found the word "Leave" spray painted on their garage door. The police were called, but with no witnesses and no clear suspects, there was little they could do. The Thompsons began to suspect Harold. They noticed his curtains twitch whenever they left the house and occasionally caught glimpses of him skulking around his property late at night. Yet, they had no concrete proof of his involvement. The confrontation. One summer night, after a particularly unsettling series of noises, James decided to confront Harold. He marched over and knocked on his door, but Harold didn't answer. Frustrated, James returned home, only to find a note taped to their front door. "Stay out of my business, or you'll regret it." This was the tipping point. James installed security cameras around their property, hoping to catch the perpetrator in the act. The footage revealed Harold frequently lurking around their yard, often in the early hours of the morning. Armed with this evidence, James and Sarah went to the police again. The unraveling. The police took their claims more seriously this time, given the video evidence. They obtained a warrant to search Harold's house. What they found inside was beyond anything the Thompsons could have imagined. Harold's home was filled with disturbing items. Surveillance photos of James and Sarah, recordings of their conversations captured through hidden microphones, and even personal items that had gone missing from their home. It became clear that Harold had been obsessively monitoring them for months, if not longer. The most chilling discovery was a detailed journal Harold had kept, documenting every movement of the Thompsons. He had written about his desire to drive them away and hinted at plans to escalate his harassment. There were also entries expressing a deep-seated paranoia and delusional thoughts, suggesting Harold believed the Thompsons were part of a conspiracy against him. The aftermath. Harold was arrested and charged with multiple counts, including stalking, vandalism, and breaking and entering. He was later found to be suffering from severe paranoid schizophrenia and was committed to a psychiatric facility for treatment. For James and Sarah, the ordeal left lasting scars. They struggled with anxiety and felt a lingering sense of vulnerability. Their trust in the safety of their home and neighborhood was shattered. With time and therapy, they began to rebuild their lives, but the shadow of their experience with Harold Whitman remained. They shared their story with local news, hoping to raise awareness about the signs of stalking and the importance of taking early action against such threats. The community of Maplewood Drive rallied around them, offering support and solidarity. The neighborhood installed better lighting, organized regular watch groups, and promoted open communication among residents to prevent such an incident from happening again. Lessons learned. The story of James and Sarah Thompson is a stark reminder that horror can lurk behind the most ordinary facades. Their experience underscores the importance of trusting one's instincts and the value of community vigilance. While their encounter with Harold Whitman was a nightmare, it also brought to light the need for mental health awareness and the importance of supporting those who suffer from mental illness. The Thompsons' tale serves as a warning and a call to action, to watch out for one another, to recognize the signs of troubling behavior, and to ensure that help is sought before it's too late. It's a testament to the resilience of individuals and communities in the face of unexpected and unsettling threats, proving that even in the darkest times, there can be a path to recovery and peace. This true neighbor horror story leaves an indelible mark on those who hear it, a sobering reflection on the thin veil that often separates normalcy from terror. Disturbing true neighbor horror story. Life in the suburbs often promises tranquility, community, and a sense of safety. Nestled within a friendly neighborhood, where everyone knows each other, it's easy to assume that your neighbors are as benign and trustworthy as you. However, the veneer of suburban serenity can sometimes hide a darker reality, as was the case in the unnerving and true story of Timothy West and his unsuspecting neighbors. The quiet arrival. In the spring of 2010, the Smith family moved into their new home on Maple Street, a picturesque lane in a quiet suburban town in Illinois. The neighborhood was tight-knit, with block parties, communal barbecues, and children playing on the streets until dusk. The Smiths, comprising David, Laura, and their 2 young children, were warmly welcomed by their new neighbors, who eagerly introduced themselves and offered help. Among these neighbors was Timothy West, a middle-aged man living alone in the house adjacent to the Smiths. Timothy was polite but somewhat reserved, often seen working in his well-kept garden or driving off to work early in the morning and returning late in the evening. While Timothy didn't join in the neighborhood gatherings often, he was always cordial when he did, offering a quiet but pleasant presence. The unfolding mystery. A year after moving in, the Smiths began to notice peculiar behavior from Timothy. His once well-maintained garden started to fall into disarray, with weeds overtaking the flowers and the grass growing unkempt. He also seemed to be at home more often, his car parked in the driveway at all hours. The change was subtle but noticeable, and it sparked quiet conversations among the neighbors. Laura, a stay-at-home mom, often saw Timothy pacing in his backyard, muttering to himself. On a few occasions, she heard raised voices from his house, but she could never discern what was being said. Concerned but not wanting to intrude, she mentioned it to David, who shrugged it off as Timothy going through a rough patch. However, as time passed, the oddities grew harder to ignore. Escalation of tensions. One summer night, the neighborhood was jolted awake by the sound of a car alarm blaring from Timothy's driveway. David rushed outside to find Timothy standing by his car, holding a baseball bat. His eyes were wild, darting around as if expecting an attacker to leap out from the shadows. When David approached, Timothy claimed that someone had been trying to break into this house, though there was no evidence to support his claim. This incident marked the beginning of more frequent disturbances. Timothy's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He installed numerous security cameras around his property, their blinking red lights a constant reminder of his growing paranoia. At night, he would sometimes stand on his porch, scanning the street with a flashlight. The once friendly man had transformed into a figure of unease, casting a shadow over the neighborhood's sense of safety. The breaking point. The Smiths, along with other neighbors, became genuinely concerned for Timothy's well-being. They debated contacting his family or the authorities, but fear of overstepping kept them from acting. One evening, however, the situation reached a breaking point. Laura was home alone with the children when she heard frantic knocking on her door. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly neighbor from across the street, visibly shaken. She claimed that Timothy had accused her of spying on him and had threatened her with a knife. Laura immediately called David, who'd rushed home from work. The police were summoned, and Timothy was taken into custody for questioning. He was released shortly after, as there was no concrete evidence beyond Mrs. Rodriguez's testimony. The shocking revelation. The community was on edge, unsure how to proceed. Timothy's behavior continued to deteriorate, and it became clear that he was in a severe mental health crisis. The neighbors decided to act collectively, organizing a meeting to discuss their concerns and potential interventions. In the midst of these discussions, a young couple, the Petersons, who had recently moved into the neighborhood, made a startling discovery. While renovating their basement, they found a hidden crawl space containing a collection of disturbing items. Surveillance photos of various neighbors, including intimate moments captured through their windows, and detailed notes about their daily routines. Shocked, they contacted the police, who launched a thorough investigation. Unmasking the threat. The investigation into Timothy West's activities revealed a deeply troubling pattern. Timothy had been spying on his neighbors for years, using high-tech equipment to monitor their movements and conversations. His increasing paranoia had driven him to believe that they were conspiring against him, leading to his increasingly erratic behavior. Police discovered that Timothy had a history of mental illness, exacerbated by the isolation and stress of living alone. He had stopped taking his medication, which had contributed to his descent into paranoia and delusion. The community, though horrified, also felt a deep sense of pity for the man who had lived among them in such torment. The aftermath. Timothy West was committed to a psychiatric facility where he received the treatment he desperately needed. The neighborhood, while relieved that the immediate threat was gone, struggled to reconcile the image of the quiet, polite neighbor with the disturbed individual he had become. The Smiths and their neighbors worked together to rebuild the sense of community that had been shattered. They instituted a neighborhood watch program and maintained regular contact with local law enforcement. More importantly, they became more vigilant in looking out for one another, understanding that true safety and community require constant care and attention. This disturbing true neighbor horror story serves as a reminder of the hidden complexities of those around us. It highlights the importance of mental health awareness, community vigilance, and the need to act compassionately but decisively when faced with troubling behavior. While the tale of Timothy West and the residents of Maple Street is unsettling, it also underscores the resilience of communities and their capacity to heal and protect one another in the face of adversity.